Quiz 3, function review. Okay, the altitude of a tree affects the rate at which the tree grows. Function GA models the growth rate in millimeters per year of a certain kind of tree at an altitude. So the capital A stands for altitude in kilometers. Match each statement with the graph which mostly corresponds to. Notice this starts at 1.4. That would be my y-intercept. It reaches the highest point at 2.6, then it begins to drop down. So it's a bell-shaped curve because it goes up and comes straight down. So bell-shaped curves go up at a steady rate and comes down as a steady rate. So let's take a look at the questions. We do have a y-intercept, and from the y-intercept we know it touches at 1.4. So we saw that from the graph. So we're going to slide this up to 1.4. Now the relative maximum or minimum, we want to know what the highest point is. We recognize that the highest point was 2.6. So we're going to slide this panel up. Now the increase or decrease in intervals. It says as the altitude surpasses 7 above sea level, the growth rate of the tree declines. So here's your 7. If you go ahead and follow this up, you can see that it is going downward. So the graph does go downward. So let's check this. Okay, next question. Mark all the relative maximum or minimum. So where's all the high points? Where does it come into a high point? Well, this is a high point. This is another high point, which is maximum, and this is another high point. So it goes up here, the graph goes up, then it comes back down. The graph goes up, then it comes back down. The graph goes up, and then it comes back down. So it went up 3 times here. Okay, select all the intervals where G is decreasing. So you want all the intervals where G is decreasing. So we have -1 to 0. We have from 1 to 2. And we have from 3 to 4. So intervals, we have from -1 to 0. So these intervals, everything is going down. So everything is going in a downward motion. So we want them all to be negative. Because it says decreasing, so we all want the intervals wherever it starts to wherever it ends goes down. So this is going down. From 1 to 2, this one is going down. From 3 to 4, this is going down. So all 3 intervals are in a downward motion. Want to mark the absolute maximum. So what is the highest point? You might think this is the highest point, but don't be fooled. The highest point is right there. So it can be actually an endpoint. Okay, we want to select the intervals where G is better than 0. So anything that's better than 0. So these are negative. No, actually positive, because all numbers that are better than 0 are positive. So this is positive, and this is the negative. So we want anything that's positive there. So from -2 to -1, this is definitely going down. So that's a negative. So if we look at this one, this interval from -2, starting here, going down, we have from -1 to 0, and then we have from 0 to 1, to which is here. So in this case here, this is a little bit different than the other ones because we want to know what's above. So we want to know what's above the x here. So you actually have two that's below. So these are below. These are actually considered a negative range. So even though this is going downward, yes, that's considered negative. It's also below the x-axis, which also will make it a downward interval, a negative interval. Even though this interval is going up, it's not above the x-axis, so that's also considered to be a negative interval. Now the only one that's above the x-axis is when we go from 0 to 1. So 0 to 1, this is my positive interval because the entire interval sits in the positive. These intervals all sit into the negatives. These interval here goes into the positive. So even though the direction here is going upward, the entire interval is in the negative area. So my best choice here would be 0 to 1 would be C.